Hey, welcome back. This is session 2 of the Guardrails series. My name is Melanie and I'll serve as your host for this session. If someone new has joined your group this week, please take a moment to introduce yourselves to each other. Stop the video and do that right now if you haven't already. Okay, some of you have stepped out to take a bigger part in the group this week by bringing refreshments, opening up your home, or facilitating the discussion. Good for you. I know your group hosts greatly appreciate the help. But also, know that you will get so much more out of this study by participating in a greater way. If you haven't signed up to do something in the coming weeks, it's not too late. Go ahead. Why don't you offer your help by putting your name on the group calendar? Everyone doesn't have to do everything, but we'd sure like everyone to do something during this series. You may have noticed last week that some people had more things to say than others. Maybe some of you couldn't get in a word at all. Here's a couple ideas for this week. First, if your group is larger than 8 people, then after this video, subgroup. Part of the group can stay right here, and the other part of the group can use a different area of the house or wherever you're meeting. This way, everyone can get their word in, and the group has a little more potential to invite new members for next week. Whether your group this week is 2 or 3 or even 8 individuals, don't feel the need to answer every question. If you've answered several questions in a row, then let someone else have a chance to answer first. Silence is not your enemy. Count to 10. I don't know. Count to 100. Maybe you need to count to 1,000. But let someone else get their word in as well. This week, let's hear from Pastor Mark Benson as we explore the principles of guardrails in our lives. Enjoy.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to session 2 of our Guardrail series. So we learned in session 1 that a guardrail is a system designed to keep vehicles from straying into dangerous or off-limit areas. They direct us and protect us. For the purpose of this series, we define guardrails as a standard or personal behavior that becomes a matter of conscience. Our greatest regrets in life could have been avoided if we had some guardrails in our lives, which means future regrets can be avoided if we have guardrails implemented. In this week's message, we talked about what makes friendships so great can also make it dangerous. When it comes to our friends, we drop our guards. We are comfortable with them, so it's natural. We have heard it said many times that our friends will determine the direction and quality of our lives. In fact, you may have had your mom or dad say that a lot during your adolescent years. The famous quote often used by parents is, "If your friend jumped off a bridge, would you jump too?" Some of you may have rolled your eyes hearing that just now. Instead of the question our parents may have used on us, a great question for us to ask ourselves is, do you surround yourself with people who value the things you value? When surrounding ourselves with friends and associates, we want to use good judgment. There is a big difference between being judgmental and having good judgment. A judgmental mindset is having an opinion about someone else and setting yourself up as their judge. It often leads to critical and harsh conclusions about people. Using good judgment, however, is when you draw a conclusion about your own life. You begin asking yourself, what is the wise thing for me to do? Good judgment says, I'm not emotionally mature enough to do fill in the blank. This statement puts the focus completely on you. It means you're not being critical of others. Rather, it's a standalone statement completely based on yourself. In other words, it's the difference between saying, you're so judgmental versus I'm exercising good judgment. Proverbs 13:20 tells us that if we walk with the wise, we will become wise, because a companion of fools suffers harm. Have you ever spent time with someone who is full of insight and wisdom? You think to yourself, wow, I really want to get more of their perspective, or I would love to grow and think more like that. Or maybe you've also experienced the opposite. You love this individual, or you know a person when they do something unwise or not smart. You think to yourself and say, what were they thinking? Or, I hope I never do something like that. Well, this text is saying we become the people we hang with. If you walk with wise people and hang with wise people, you too will become wise. It's contagious. A fool is someone who is not careful. By hanging with the fool, you will not only become a fool, but you will suffer harm. So as they go, you'll go. You may not do what they do now, but over time, you'll get the leftover mess of what goes bad, which is why you'll suffer harm. Remember, this isn't about being judgmental. It is about using good judgment. The truth is, friends who aren't careful with their own life will not be careful with yours. If they aren't careful with their marriage, they won't be careful with your marriage. If they aren't careful with their finances, they won't be careful with your finances. If they're not careful with their own heart, they're not going to be careful with your heart. If they're not careful with their own mind and soul, they won't be careful with your mind and soul. To sum it up, your friends' priorities will become your priorities. You are the sum average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So, what do we do with all this? How do we have healthy guardrails within our friendships? In light of the principle of wisdom, here are 4 suggested guardrails for friendships. The first guardrail is when your friends are doing something that's moving in a direction you don't like. That's a tip to rethink that group of friends. Can you think of a time that you had friends that wanted to go a direction that you didn't want to go in? Maybe it was a time where you were in high school or college. Maybe you've recently experienced amongst your group of friends, family, or coworkers. If you went along with the idea you didn't want to go in, how did that end for you? Usually, when you have a group of friends that are going in a direction that you don't want to go, you get that uneasy feeling in your stomach. Or sometimes it's just a feeling you can't shake. Can I just encourage you to pay attention to those feelings because they are there for a reason? What would it look like if you started paying attention to those feelings and treated them as healthy triggers? Those moments will serve you well the next time your group of friends want you to do something you don't feel comfortable with. The second suggested guardrail is when you catch yourself pretending to be someone that you're not. Do you have people in your life that make you feel you have to go along in order to get along? Do you slowly start sacrificing who God created you to be in order to keep a friend? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, I reconsider those friends. Or if you think the relationship is worth it, be willing to have the tough conversation and confront them on it. If they're not willing to respect your views and your values on making you do something that goes against your beliefs, you may need a new set of friends. And I know that may be tough for some of you guys to hear, but if you're not willing to engage in a healthy conversation to confront them on it, or if they're not willing to hear your perspective on it, you may want to reconsider the company that you're keeping. This doesn't mean we don't love them. It simply means you know your values and that you're not willing to compromise them for anyone. The third guardrail is when you feel pressure to compromise. Have you ever found yourself in a position where you've been peer pressured to do something you didn't want to do? You're hanging with a group of folks and someone has an idea to go somewhere and do something, but you're just not feeling it. Pay attention to that, because that's a sign that you probably don't need to do it. When we find ourselves having to negotiate our internal voice into why we should do something, although we don't want to do it, it most likely means you're compromising something that's important to you. If you find yourself saying yes to something in order to please a person you really have no desire to do it, it means you're being peer pressured into compromising something you don't believe in. Let me just encourage you to pay attention to that. Why? Because when you get that feeling, it's lighting up your conscience and informing your inner person to not do something you don't value. The fourth guardrail is when you catch yourself thinking, I'll go, but I won't participate. What? Come on, guys. You know good and well if you think that or something close to that statement, you have no business being there. Have you ever heard someone say that it's easier to be pulled down than pulled up? That's something that I heard a lot as a teenager. It's easier for a group of people to pull you down into certain situations than it is for you to raise an entire group to your standards. When you have the thought that says, I'll go, but I won't participate, that is a sign that you need to get a new group of friends. And the last one is when you hope the people that you care about don't know your whereabouts. Guys, can I just say there is no good that comes from you not sharing your location of where you might be. Something I've heard parents say is, if you have to be sneaky about something, that it is your red flag to know you shouldn't be doing it. So the 4 guardrails in friendships are: when your friends are doing something that's moving in a direction you don't like, when you catch yourself pretending to be someone that you're not, when you feel pressure to compromise, when you catch yourself thinking, I'll go, but I won't participate, or when you hope the people that you care about don't know your whereabouts. Without guardrails, you will begin to ask yourself, how did this happen? Luke 7:35 tells us that wisdom is proved right by all of her children. It's not about other people. It is about your life and your future relationships. It's an expression of love when you remain in the safe zone because you are better able to help other people. Remember, it's not about being judgmental, but exercising good judgment. We're so glad you're taking this journey with us through your small group. You're doing life with people that share your values. So discuss these questions laid out in your study guide together and enjoy the conversation. We'll see you guys in the next session.